Hello everyone, welcome back to Uncle Smithy and Kind Words, where we dive in and give some life advice from someone who has been in lockdown all by themselves for the last 9 months, who's gone slowly insane. Cheers everyone. I've got my little elf hat up. This is the closest I've been between anyone's legs for quite a while. Got some mood lighting on, actually got my camera in shot for this episode after the test pilot one. Let's dive in. What's the worst that can happen? Okay, so question 1 in Kind Words Lo-Fi Beats to Chill to, or whatever it is. I find myself so angry about so many things every day. With so many signs pointing to our world falling apart, I sometimes feel guilty about my own moments of joy and happiness. Anyone else feeling this way? Anything you can share to help? Yes, I totally get this, and I kind of swing on a pendulum between embracing those moments of joy and happiness, but then also feeling horrifically guilty about some of it as well. And there's several layers as to why that happens, and I'll kind of start off in a global societal point of view and then kind of drill down and drown down into like a very personal thing. Our brain is not designed to cope with mass information. And even if you go back, say, 50 years, the newspapers would come out daily, so you'd be able to pick up that news, put it down, move on. We're now so interconnected that our brain doesn't understand that you reading a news article on Twitter that's just happened about, say, like when Australia was on fire, basically, and now the Amazon's on fire, and then there's like the American planes are on fire, or whatever it is. Your brain doesn't understand that that is not an immediate danger to you if you're in like Libya. Probably a bad example, but it's difficult for your brain to not think that you're being attacked immediately there and then and wanting to go into flight or fight syndrome. And then that is, I think, exasperating, people then feeling guilty or not wanting to give in to that joy or happiness that's around you. And when you've got that constant barrage and then people putting up that public persona as well of there's a specific term for it that's escaped my head, but it's where people are basically like virtue signalling. That's what I was looking for. And then they'll virtual signal in a public space and then go behind those doors and be very inconsistent with their online persona. And then, but you only see that online persona, so then you're made to feel guilty even more. I think one of the things that you need to kind of, if you get into this rut, and I've been in this rut plenty of times before, is that you can't have darkness without light, but you can't have light without darkness as well. And it's a bit of a hippie way of thinking about it, but we're constantly in this chaos versus zen, light, dark, yin yang kind of swinging, and you've got this pendulum that will swing one way or the other. And if you don't go in and experience that joy and happiness and potentially start spreading that around, you then start to become muted and neutral, and then not part of that meter swaying back to give some joy and happiness back into the world. And if you stop, you may have then passed on a little bit of joy and happiness to someone else in sharing what you felt, and then they'll feel a little bit less. And it's like a domino effect that will trickle on round, and potentially loads and loads of people will then end up as a domino effect feeling less happy, included, and feeling like their worth is worthwhile getting up in the day for. Because if everyone feels guilty about every moment of joy because one person is unhappy, or there is a big say if there's like a natural disaster that happens and there's a big earthquake and lots of people are killed or something like that in a very poor country, you can do something, but then you need to be able to disconnect and go, I can only affect what I can affect, and some things are out of my control. And be able to know that that is out of your control starts to help you feel less guilty. From a personal experience, I do work within government work. And I kind of came into government work with a very naive way of thinking 12 years ago, that I'd be able to like help thousands of people and be able to like change the world, end poverty, get people up there and make things better. And because of the way how things work, and you have to affect small change to then gain a reputation to get bigger change and so on and so forth, you're chipping away with your little pickaxe in the corner, hoping that some of the stuff that you do gets noticed and can make small incremental changes that can build that snowball effect. And being able to enjoy your happiness and your emotions and sharing that with other people is like that pickaxe and chipping away and getting that snowball up, because you don't know who's going to get caught up in that snowball and what change that will affect over time. And this kind of swinging around of the meter of chaos to zen and happiness to misery, you're very rarely in this balance in the middle, and I'm like zen happiness, but it's very rare that you're just centered in the middle and you're okay and you're fine, because you've always got these forces tipping you one way or another. And so you need to let whatever's going on kind of play out. And that works both ways. When you're feeling sad, feel that sadness, because the sooner you feel it and you kind of purge it out of your system, it's not then bubbling under the surface like a slow cooker. And that's only in my brain because I've bought myself a slow cooker for Christmas. And I'm testing it at the moment. Should have put that on at lunchtime, not at dinner time. Slow is in the word of that. And dinner will be ready at about 3 a.m. Thank God I'm filming and doing content all night. But you need to let these emotions kind of ride out so that you can then go back into centre and affect where you're going. I hope that's worthwhile kind of understanding. But my advice to anyone that gets feeling about guilty is A, try to not feel guilty and ride out whatever emotion, good or bad, that is inside you, to get it out of your system, because then you'll have a release emotionally, be that good or bad, that then brings you back into a place of balance and perspective, reflection, and you'll feel less guilty, especially when you're able to share that happiness, even with just someone that's close to you, because that makes their day better too. And if you aren't sharing that joy, then I suppose you could view yourself almost as being just as selfish as the people that are ruining the world. Potentially. Sounds a bit harsh. You know what I mean. Anyway, let me type up my reply and we'll see what I say. Okay. So, my advice is to let your emotions run, good or bad. If sharing your joy helps spread it, someone else's day may be better as a result, and that can have a small effect. That ripples. Siren. That ripples or snowballs out, counteracting some of the rubbish that's going on in this world. We're all constantly in a push and pull of positivity and negativity, so I don't feel nearly as guilty as I did before about having a good day if others feel terrible. Be respectful, but try to disconnect from the media terror, this is where I'm coming from, and channel that positivity into goodness for those close. Off it goes! Send! Thank you for taking time to think about a stranger. I'll rush that right over. Thank you! And you keep writing, people. I'm sure they'll love this. Okay, next one, and I think it's really kind of a crucial thing to talk about, specifically around this time of year where you have Eid, Christmas, and I'm sure other religious ceremonies that I'm not particularly aware of, where groups of gatherings of families and like-minded cultures get together. So for this person E, for the past few days I feel very lonely. I don't trust my parents as they don't trust me. I don't go to doctors, but I should. I have my online friends, but I feel that that's not enough. I just figured that I have never cared about myself and I still don't. Well, that's a difficult place to come from, E. And there's a couple of key things that I want to kind of call out from that one. The first thing I would say is loneliness is probably one of the most painful and silent things that you can deal with mentally. Is it a mental disorder? No. Can it have enough mental effects that will affect you like a mental disorder or a physical disorder? Absolutely. There's so much correlation between people being or feeling lonely and the decline of their health. If someone feels lonely, my very first thing that I would say is that it doesn't matter if someone is online or in person. If you have friends that you can reach out to, or family members, or even if you start to think about how can I get into some kind of group around something that I like or enjoy, that will provide the start of a seed of something that can help you feel less lonely over time. I think loneliness can absolutely be exasperated for not loving or caring about yourself, which this person has alluded to. And for that, a doctor could be good, but you need to probably understand that whether or not you feel that it's a medical... what am I trying to say? I think doctors, very much like psychologists or kind of mental practices or something like that, even if it's like self-help books, they all require you to have a belief that you're going to work through and fix something. And different methods will work for different people, which is why I don't poo-poo some alternative therapies and alternative ways of thinking that maybe not be completely plastered as being psychologists or doctors and medicals. Because if you firmly believe in some kind of alternative way of looking at things, and that helps you discombobulate your brain, who's for me to say that that isn't a worthy practice? Which is why you need to have the belief in going to a doctor will help, going to a psychologist will help. Because if you firmly like, nope, then when they set you a task for you to help you get down that road to eventually accepting yourself, loving yourself, which sounds proper cringe, I know. If you don't believe it, you're not going to put in the work, and then you won't get the result, and then you'll blame the process, and then you won't move forward. So for me, my first piece of advice to someone who feels like this, particularly as you say, I don't go to doctors, but I should. One, I would say, is try a doctor. But if it's around trying to build up self-esteem, self-respect, love for yourself and things like that, from which so much will then grow, because it might be that you then feel more confident to reach out to friends in person, making online friends. And there is nothing wrong with online friends. The vast majority of the closest people in my life are online friends who I've then actually been able to meet in person. And they're some of my favourite people in my life, and I love them to bits. Nothing wrong with that at all. But what I would say is that when you go to a doctor, is explore different methodologies around things that might work or help support you. And if something doesn't click immediately, obviously give it a couple of goes, because sometimes it takes a while to kind of get around and tune your brain and your mindset into a way of thinking. But don't kind of stop at, oh, that person didn't fix me, therefore I am broken and I cannot be healed. It's about that matchup of what fits with your mentality and your mindset and your belief systems, and it's another cringe saying, but your love language. If you trade in different ways of thinking, then let me think of an example that would be psychological based. So you say that you don't trust your parents as they don't trust you. what is their version of trust and what is your version of trust, and how do they align, or do they just not align at all? And actually, you need to find a different commonality and base to build up your relationship with each other again. Now, if it's a broken mess and it's abusive and you're looking to get out, that's perfectly fine. None of this necessarily applies. But if you want to try and have a working, positive relationship with your parents, I would try to understand what they value so that you can then see whether that aligns with your brain or thinking. Because it might be, so trust with them would be, I don't know, being home at a certain time, making sure that you attend school or college, and trying your best with something. So if you're like, fuck it, homework with 2 minutes to go, I've not failed, I've not gone to school or college today, I'm going to blow it all off because I want to do XYZ, then they aren't going to trust you because you aren't repaying them back in their language of trust. So building bridges like that can go such a long way in order to like repair a relationship. And with that as well, you are then able to offer the seeds of, look at what I do, I can do A, B and C, so therefore you should be able to trust me in being able to do blah blah and blah, and you can kind of build that adult relationship out of that. But the most important thing out of this one is really speak to someone around the loneliness and where that stems from, because if you are able to feel more confident and self-respectful and self-loving about yourself, forever what modality you choose, that will then start to help you feel more secure, and therefore loneliness becomes less of an immediate priority because you'll be able to feel comfortable in your own skin rather than looking for that external gratification, I guess. I kind of hope that makes sense. It's a very long-winded and roundabout answer, but I tried. Let's see what I type in. Okay, so for this one, I'd recommend seeing someone, not always a doctor, just to talk about how you can feel about being more how you can feel more comfortable in your skin. That will help build confidence and self-love that will make you feel more happy within rather than seeking validation in others. Learning what you and your parents and friends value in trust and friendship will help you demonstrate you are able to hold your own and earn their respect and trust back. It may take a while, and keep trying new ways to heal to see what fits you, i.e. psychology, alternative therapies, etc. Good luck. Very difficult to try and squeeze that one into 14 lines because there's a ton that you could kind of mine into. We'll see. Very wordy these ones today. Soz. Off it goes. Okay, after a bizarre interruption where some cat was headbutting itself trying to get through my front door, we're back. And we're on to the dreaded COVID questions, and I was really reluctant to do anything around COVID. I didn't want it to happen, but there's so many letters that I feel kind of called to kind of do something. And this was kind of the least controversial one that I could find. So I've chickened out a little bit on this one. But it's my biggest worry is that now the Prime Minister has put in more stricter restrictions to some parts of the UK, everyone's going to end up more violent because people won't follow the rules. And all I can see is everyone dead. And this has probably come out because Tier 4 was announced today at the time of recording. I'm in Tier 4. Hello, I'm not a zombie yet. And I think it's preying on everyone's mind that every time there is a lockdown and every time there's tighter restrictions and people start to feel more constricted for longer, and particularly over time with Eid and Christmas, and perhaps less around the religious connotations of things, but more around the symbolic light at the end of the tunnel, that a lot of people had kind of clung on to, myself included to some degree, that I guess I should kind of roll back a little bit. I'd kind of clung on to Christmas as a point where I could have one day where I could see some family in a non-transactional context. Everything that I've done this year since March has been with protection and COVID in mind. My dad is highly vulnerable. He'll be right at the front of the queue, I think, for the vaccines when they start launching around here, which we've had an announcement about. And everything that I've done this year has basically been to protect him. My mum's a pensioner, but in relatively decent enough health, so she's kind of less critical. But what it means is that I've not seen any other family members. I've been able to see my other half, but I've not seen him since September, and that has been really difficult because we're in year 2 of a relationship that I feel very strongly about, but it means that because we were long distance to begin with, it's kind of almost stuck it on ice because we've had to like digidate it and all that kind of stuff. So that's been like a remote relationship, which is not really what I had in mind. But it's kind of, you have to make do with it. And the reason why I'm kind of saying about all this kind of having to make do and making sacrifices and thinking about who, looking after the ones that you love and being responsible, is that when people are breaking the rules and being irresponsible, regardless of whatever they're thinking and how they're trying to justify it, if you then are riled up into violence, you're then crossing that barrier from being responsible to irresponsible. Even if it's just like a flick of a switch and you do it and then you kind of reel yourself back in again, you're kind of then putting yourself into a checkmate position, because then that means that you've then put other people at risk. And I think there's this kind of dichotomy where it's fragile, but it's keeping that state of play in motion. I think every time we go into lockdown without seeing progress, that then makes that more fragile, which is why I think there's been a very specific timeline. So Christmas, yay, we're all going to have it, and not everyone, but a large vocal section are like, this is terrible, you're basically going to bring out wave 3, and we all know that the third one in all kind of trilogies not always the best of the bunch, but you kind of had that come along, and then before they could kind of quash Christmas, they had to get that vaccine out there, because it's like, we're going to look at what you could have. The cavalry is coming. Oh, I hate using political speak, but you can't have that yet. And I think it would be a very different response if we didn't have vaccines being rolled out. Now, there is a trajectory of time and a timeline of that vaccine that is going to take a very long time to get going if they kind of stay at their current rate of pace and all that kind of stuff. But it gives people the ammunition of, I can lose this Christmas, I can lose this Eid, and other religious ceremonies that kind of go on around this time of year, because I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, because the vaccines are coming, things are looking a little bit better. Now we can see a second strain, but we've already can see that we can tackle the first one, so this should kind of follow a similar path. And you would think that some of the tech that we've already done will get us there. So there's different narratives that you can weave to try and quash that violent streak down. And so I don't see that happening. Plus, I think people have just become too keyboard warrior-y and less proactive about rallying up against things, because people feel like they can angry all caps it on Facebook or Twitter and believe that that's changed something, and it probably hasn't. The closest that I've come to any kind of violence, for me personally, is having to tell someone to kind of stop breathing over me in a queue at Lidl's. It's happened twice actually, where I've kind of said to someone, "Oh, would you mind standing back, please?" But it's how you kind of do it in a non-aggressive fashion that makes it like a reasonable request. And so I've had one person who just went, "Oh, sorry, mate," and kind of jet back, and one person kind of gave you a bit of a funny look, and so I just kind of stayed polite, and they did kind of begrudgingly kind of back again, and I thought, no, I'm not having that. Plus, she was like a proper gran, and I was like, "I'm doing this for you, love," in my brain, but that's not how you go about it. So yeah, just hugs to everyone that needs it. I think we all need one. So I hope that kind of makes sense. It's going to be a long road, and resilience to uncertainty is the big thing that I've kind of had to take away this year. And I've had to deal with this an awful lot just in my work in general, because it's just diving from one complete shit show to another. My words, not actual works words. And so I'm just now extending it to just the general life and day to day. And I think that my background in sorting out some stuff around project management has been really, really key with this, because it's been able to help me kind of apply some of that logic to everyday scenarios, and then kind of being like, right, well, that option is now closed to me. How else can I deal with it? And how can I then make the best of the situation that I've got and be okay with that? So yeah, I don't know if I've answered that one particularly, but okay, here's my attempted reply. Hello from Tier 4. Hello, is it me you're looking for? I can confirm we're not always on vis yet. I think everyone is too busy being a keyboard warrior to uprise personally, but the key in the narrative is that the vaccine is out, and I think without that being out there first, people would be more angry. In order to be more violent, those who follow the rules would have to break them, so I think that keeps the admittedly fragile state of the UK civil. As long as there is progress, I think people will be okay. I stay polite when asking peeps to step back in the shop queue. Never had any bother yet. You just know I'm going to get into a fight tomorrow. Off it goes. Thank you, dear postman. Or lady. Wahaha! From one complete extreme to another, but still kind of COVID related. For a while now, I've been trying to motivate myself to start an at-home workout routine. How does anyone have any tips for how I started? What I do to eat to stay in shape? Now, as you can see, my shape is large, but before lockdown back in March, it was larger. Who would have thunk it? And there's two things that I've kind of introduced this year that have helped me still pig out like a bitch, because I do love late night nibs. Love a nibble at night. But yeah, so the first thing is I've started eating spinach, which I didn't particularly like as a kid, and I just hadn't really returned to it. But I bought spinach accidentally for some reason, and then I was like, oh fine, I'll just stuff it in some sandwiches. And I was like, baby spinach particularly, it's a very mild taste. So I'm not a fan of like celery, where it's just like peppery weirdness without it being peppery, if that makes sense. So yeah, and what spinach does is it really fills me up personally, which is then stopping me and reducing some of the late night snacks that I numb up. So that's been really helpful. From a physical perspective, where I've just been trapped in this room for my entire year, VR rhythm action games, yes. Particularly shouting out Beat Saber, Box VR, Audica, although that is less around being physical, but I use that as like a cool down between them. Yoga Master is surprising, although that's not VR. You just use Move controllers with that. Just Dance, and I've got a massive backlog of all of those. I think I've got every Just Dance game ever that's been released across like various different platforms. So like some of them are like Just Dance 3 I've got on like the PS3, but Just Dance, the very first one, I've got on the Wii, that kind of thing. And the key with this is having variety. I did a series on this channel probably about 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer, because it was PS3 based, and it was going through different Move controller fitness games to kind of show you how they worked, and it helped, and I did lose some weight in January, but I kind of petered it out and never really kept going with it. But what I found is that with the VR stuff, I'm able to pepper it in and rotate the games around. Like Beat Fever would be another one, Dance Collider, because you're constantly kind of moving your arms, but then that also kind of, you're swaying, so it starts to get your hips mobilized, and that's kind of shrunk my admittedly still very ample stomach down. I noticed that I've gone up or down a notch on my belt without really trying, and it's just about getting that rotation in so that you stop getting into the boredom of it. And so the more variety that you have in that, the less of a chore it becomes, and the less you kind of zone out and wish you were doing something else. Plus, where I've become a bit of a trophy whore, I'm like, where's the trophies for having done 100 workouts, bitches? And that's kept me kind of motivated for returning back to stuff, but still keeping it in like a rotation. So I only tackle like Box VR once a week. Beat Saber I dive on maybe once a week. And I've got like 10 or 11 of them, so I can kind of go round and only touch on something like once a fortnight, and that keeps it fresh if I'm just doing it for like 30 minutes a day. So that's my tips. Okay, so here's my reply. Although I'm still chunky, I've lost weight during all the lockdowns. I started eating baby spinach and it really helped fill me up and stop me snacking quite so much in the evenings. For exercise, I have about 10 to 15 rhythm VR games, Just Dance, Yoga Master, and a few other motion styled games to rotate around to stop me getting bored. Playing the same old thing. Do that for about half an hour or so and knacking myself out. More. It's a gone. Okay, a little bit of a change up of scene. Send me your favourite movie from your country or a favourite from a foreign country. Now, I do have some like interesting preferences, but because this is like the Christmas edition of Uncle Smithy, I want to recommend a anime called Tokyo Godfathers. When I think of Christmas, I think of this film because of the time of year of when it kind of takes place is around the Christmas period, but it's also around basically three outcasts wandering around kind of lamenting their broken lives, but finding a kind of ramshackle family with each other where they will look after and protect each other and find the beauty of the community and the world around them through interconnectivity. And I think it's one of those films that is really perfectly kind of melded together in a way that everything on screen means something, connects to the characters and the story, the overarching kind of message of being kind to others really, really pours out, and you might find kindness in the most unlikely of corners of the world. And yeah, Tokyo Godfathers is one of the more interestingly unique, quietly uplifting movies, and it's a Christmas one, so yay for that. If you're going for something that is also Christmas related, but you want some action and you don't want it to be Die Hard, I strongly recommend a Korean film called The Tower. And this is because I love disaster movies, and it's set on Christmas Eve in a giant tower that looks really like the Petronas Towers, actually. Two giant towers with a bridge kind of crossing in the middle. And there's a accident in a PR event where a helicopter basically smashes into the tower and starts off an absolutely monumental fire. And you follow like a group of characters all trying to escape and get out of the tower, and the firefighters trying to rescue them. So yay if you want that for action. If you want something sentimental and heartwarming and uplifting, Tokyo Godfathers are my 2 recommendations. So there we go. There's the 2 options in there. Let's get that sent off. Boing! Okay, I think that's about it for the Christmas edition of Uncle Smithy. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feedback always appreciated. I appreciate that some of my answers are a bit long-winded. But yay, have a good one, and look after yourselves, and remember, take a breather. It'll all still be there for you afterwards.